I just wanna spend the night together.
Welcome in, King Fred. That's King Mike you here. I don't know how you would think that sounds like me, King Fred, but that's okay. Welcome in, you bum.
No.
Hey,
Oh
we
no,
are
I was on the
on. We
phone.
are live.
No, I was on the phone. Could you guys
No
hear me?
problem. Yeah, we hear you. You sound great. I heard you
No, could you
earlier.
guys hear me?
No, I could not.
No.
Oh, niggas, shut up. I was in a whole nother room. Bye, Fred. Hey, how you doing, Mike?
I'm good.
Good. That's
He's
Fred talking about.
feisty.
Huh?
He's feisty today. You feisty?
No, I'm not fighting.
Okay.
Fred
All
just
right.
Fred just wearing the inside of my butt hairs. He just. Are you feisty?
I like it when Jay's feisty.
You do?
Yeah. Well,
You like
growl.
Could you hear? Could you guys hear me
KBLA-AM.
talking in the other room?
No, we could not.
Oh, okay. I don't know what he's talking about.
Now, there is a piece of artwork that is behind you that I have not
Mhm.
seen before now.
Well,
Very
maybe you.
nice.
Well, maybe you shouldn't be. Maybe it
Well,
been sitting up there.
Is that
I
a
just
turkey?
noticed it.
Been up there for a while.
Is that a
Fred, how
flower?
could you say it sound like I'm having a stroke when I wasn't even nowhere near the mic? What is he talking about?
Oh, I
He's
was humming. What song was I humming too? I was humming a song. Let me see.
Oh, that
Uh,
was Mike humming, dum dum.
Spending the night together.
Oh, so he thought that was me, Mike. So Fred talking shit about you.
Hey
That
now.
was Mike.
I
That's Mike you talking that shit about, Fred.
well, I thought he thought it was me, so I called him a bum. So it happens.
Yeah, that was Mike. Now all of a sudden, it ain't no stroke.
That was a white guy humming.
Cowing down to the white man. he cowing, Mike, he cowing down to the white man on you. Cowing
That's a
down to the white man, the white man, white man, the white man, cow down to the white man. Mike sounds like Jude. That's what
trying to think of an artist. Um,
How could it feel? I wasn't even on the mic. I was all the way in another room, Fred. So you know what you're talking about.
yeah,
I was,
Fredibus.
Fred is goofy. So
Um,
We love him though.
55.
okay, so is this show on it's on the J King Network too, right?
Yes, but I was moving it over now that we're live to your page. Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, but I don't see it on J King Network.
It
Hey, Evac, what's happening?
all right, I'll be right back.
Crackering.
It says we're live. The red light is on the J King Network side and the YouTube side.
Okay, so I'm on the J King Network. When I go to J King Network, I
Hmm.
don't see. Hold on, let me go to J King with J King Network. It don't. I
It
don't
doesn't.
see it. Oh, I see it now. Here it is, but it's not. It doesn't show the red light.
The red light is on your side?
No.
Hmm.
Mike, how was your day?
It's been good. It's been good. The fuse on my heater at home went out, so it's been cold,
Oh,
but good.
but you guys, y'all can do that. I remember I remember being in junior high school, and we went to the Shakespearean Festival in Ashland, Oregon,
Uh-huh.
and so we stayed at uh University of Washington for one night. Everybody was, for one night because it was spring break. I guess it was their break time, and
The
we got to
Southern
stay in.
Oregon, University of
Yeah,
Southern Oregon.
no. Washington State. We stayed there a night before we went to Ashland,
Oh, okay.
and we woke up the next morning and it was cold. I mean, it was because it was snow, and it was white guys outside playing football with no shirts on.
Dumbasses. I watched some people play football in the snow yesterday. I'm like, they're crazy. I'd be out there with my puffer jacket on.
We used to play football in the rain, and then I remember one year in California, in Sacramento, it snowed, and but it was like it was more slushy snow. What didn't get snow, but it was the one time it did, and we ran out. We played football out there.
Oh, heck yeah. That must have been 77, right?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
actually probably 75.
The great snowstorm of
75.
75, 77,
Yeah.
76 and a half. Right on. Uh, Well, we're 2 minutes out and I'm at 1.5.
Hmm.
J King Show, KBLA Talk
Now, what are we
15.
doing? Are we doing 12 and 12
Yes, please. We'll go 12, 12. First half, 24 minutes. Last half, 9,
and 4 and
4,
4?
4, 4.5,
Okay.
4, 4.5. Whatever feels good.
Okay. What are you talking about, Fred? I don't even know what you're saying. Do you need to really figure out what it is that you're trying to say to me? I don't know what all these things. Why don't you leave alone, Snitchy? Why don't you? Mr. Singh. I'm good. I'm getting ready to do a radio show. I'm getting ready to tape it. But hey, your gas station over on El Camino, the air, yeah, the one that's on the one that's by around the corner from the office, from the chamber. The air doesn't work. Yeah, fix that air. I went and got gas today and couldn't get air in my tire. Yeah, I know, but I go to that one. I just want to let you know that so you can know. I'm gonna call you when I get off the air. Okay. Okay. All right. You ready, Mike?
Yeah, I think we're ready. All
Yeah.
right. Let me find this. Good levels. Sounds great. Have a great show,
Okay.
Jay.
Thank you,
In
sir.
3, 2, 1.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Whatever it is, make it good for you. My name is Jay King. Welcome to the Jay King Show at KBLA Talk 1580. We have a good one for you today. Our show is going to be on George Jackson. You know who he is, right? The great George Jackson. No, you don't. Because George Jackson isn't anybody that you would necessarily know. Because George Jackson is just a person born enslaved in 1858. But there's something compelling about George and his story. And the most compelling part is that George is not alone. He's not one of one. He's one of many. This was the way life was. And what I hope to do today is paint you a picture of an enslaved person's life. This is told in a first person. George Jackson, born in 1858, dies in 1937. But before he dies, he gives a firsthand account of his life as an enslaved person. It is important to me that these stories are told, but more importantly, that they're heard and known to give context to those who believe that there's not a debt owed to us as a community, not because of slavery, but what happened after slavery, when our government became criminals, part of a criminal act, and that's denying its citizens the right to freedom, the right to vote, the right to the same equal opportunities that their white counterparts have. Because our government violated the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments of the formerly enslaved. My name is Jay King. I'm the president and CEO of the California Black Chamber of Commerce. I am the leader of the group Club Nouveau, and I do a podcast every Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on J King Network. You can watch our podcast on YouTube under J King Network or on Facebook under J King Network. I do a radio show on Mondays called Politics from 1 to 2:45 p.m. at 97.5 FM KDEE. You can listen to it at kdeefm.org. And I also do a show on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays from 3 to 5 p.m. called Traffic Jam. But of all the shows I do, the show I do here at KBLA Talk 1580, the J King Show, is my most rewarding show because of the subjects I tackle. Today we're going to tackle the life of an enslaved person. His name is George Jackson. George Jackson was born on February 6th, 1858. Not in freedom, not in a home of his own choosing, but in a storeroom on a plantation in Logan County, Virginia. George Jackson entered this world as an enslaved person. The room where he was born was called the weaving room. It was a place for cotton and yarn, not children. His bed was a small cradle pushed underneath the larger bed during the daytime. So even as an infant, George's existence was meant to stay out of sight. His mother was named Betsy Jackson. She was enslaved. His father was named Henry Jackson. He was enslaved. His grandmother was also enslaved. The problem here is that each of them belonged to a different person, to a different man. His mother, his father, his grandmother, they're all enslaved by different families. And like all of the other Black families in America, before the Civil War, Georgia's family didn't legally belong to itself. George was one of 16 children. All of them would believe to have been dead before him because during the course of his life, his brothers and sisters are sold off at different times and he doesn't know where they went. So they, in his mind, were dead. One of his earliest memories was him nearly burning to death. He was pulled from a fire by his brother, but the scars from that fire remained on his leg for the rest of his life. Long before he understood slavery, his body already carried its marks. As a child, George worked. He pulled weeds in gardens. He washed dishes in the kitchen. He was never paid a dime. At one time, when he accidentally pulled a cabbage instead of a weed, he was beaten. He remembered crying as the mistress, is what they called her, struck him. She didn't strike him for rebellion. She struck a child for making a mistake. Childhood for George and children like George didn't include innocence. There was no room for them to be innocent and learn. It only included labor. Childhood for enslaved children was included punishment and hunger. The food they ate was basic and scarce. There was cornbread. There was fat pork. There was black molasses and milk that was oftentimes spoiled. And the meat they ate was boiled, always boiled. So he never, ever recalled eating fish or wild game. In the summer, he went barefoot. In the winter, he wore heavy wool, stiff, and unforgiving clothing. The plantation he lived on was large. It was over 400 acres. And it had dozens of enslaved people. George remembered some of his relatives being taken away, locked overnight or handcuffed. Not because they did anything wrong, but because they were to be sold like cattle the next day. He never forgot the sound of chains or the silence that was left behind. It was heart-wrenching. I can only imagine that one day your family's here, the next day they're gone, they've disappeared. No goodbyes, no explanations, just gone. And then the war comes. Now, George is still a child because George is born in 1858 and the Civil War comes in 1862. He could hear the cannons, the thunder of the cannon. He could hear the gunfire. He saw the horses and the soldiers fall, the bullets that struck the homes. The violence of the Civil War passed close enough for a boy like George to feel it. Even if freedom hadn't arrived yet, he could feel that it was coming. When surrender finally came, he remembered the feeling clearly. Enslaved people were glad, but not triumphant. They were just relieved. See, there was relief because freedom didn't bring wealth. Freedom didn't bring ease. Freedom didn't bring any type of relief other than the relief of being owned by someone. Oftentimes when I hear people say nothing's changed, I know that those are people who haven't read about the history that our ancestors endured. I believe if they saw us today, they will go, wow, look at how far we've come. So after emancipation, George worked in cornfields. His labor was paid not to him, but to his mother. And she got it in clothing and in food. She started earning small wages working in kitchens. They were free. They were poor. George got married in the early 1880s under the authority of a church rather than an owner. Because you got to remember back then, if you wanted to marry somebody, you had to ask your owner if you could marry someone else. And oftentimes those owners would allow it and then rape your wife and put a baby in your wife. He and his wife had 14 children. Of the 14 children, only 6 of them lived to adulthood. Man, imagine that. He buried children, something slavery had prepared him for, but it never made it easy. You see, what you're about to hear is the life of a slave. Yeah. Not, and his life ain't special. There are millions more just like him. We just don't know their story. My name is Jay King, and you're tuned into the Jay King Show at KBLA Talk 1580. We'll be right back.
Good. Very good.
How many minutes?
Okay. So another one. Yep. 12 minutes here.
12. It's the Jay King Show at KBLA Talk 1580. We are perusing the life of one George Jackson. Nothing extraordinary about George, other than the fact that he was enslaved and at the end of slavery, because he's born in 1858, and it's 4 years later, 1862, that the Civil War takes place. And in 3 years, the Civil War is over with. But in this short life, just the brutality of it jumps at you. Faith became central to his life. He joined a church in Upperville, Virginia, because he believed that religion helped people to endure this world and prepare it for the next. Because this world that George Jackson has grown up in isn't a very kind world. But George Jackson, he makes it through. And I think it only becomes clear to us how short a time ago slavery actually was. Because in 1937, George is still alive. And he's a former slave. I just want you to wrap your mind around that this is in 1937. 1937 is 88 years ago. 88 years ago, somebody who was formerly enslaved is still around. George Jackson was an old man, almost 80 years old in 1937. He lived in Steubenville, Ohio. Lived in a little small rented house. He described himself and his children as poor as church mice. He had received only a few months of schooling his whole life. In 1937, that year, a government interviewer sat with him as part of what they called the Federal writer's project. They say the country was changing. The last generation born into slavery was disappearing. George Jackson told his story so it wouldn't disappear with him. He did not speak of grand victory. He didn't claim any type of fame. He didn't frame his life as extraordinary. And this is why his life matters. You see, George Jackson represents millions. Children born into bondage. Families broken apart. Lives lived mostly unrecorded. So his testimony preserves the truth, not of exception, but of routine suffering. Routine suffering and quiet survival. And he lived long enough to tell the truth. George Jackson's voice reminds us that American history didn't just happen in documents and monuments. It happened in kitchens. It happened in fields. It happened in storerooms and barefoot summers. And because he spoke, we can still hear it. Before the microphone, before the interviews, before the written record, before anybody cared about that, when he had to watch his step, mind his P's and Q's. See, what you're hearing, it's not about legend. It's not about a folklore. It's not an exaggeration. What you're hearing is history. True American history. And this is how slavery worked. A family could love each other, but the law didn't. Some died as children. Some lived through slavery. Some disappeared in cell and separation. This is America. This is how she operated. George is but one story, but George isn't the only story. What makes George so unique? What makes George unique is that you're hearing his story. He lived long enough to be able to tell you. He lived when a signature was not needed by you, so you didn't have one. He lived when taking pictures of you weren't necessary. You weren't important enough. He lived long enough for you to have no legal existence beyond ownership. See, George Jackson was born into that silence. And he would live nearly 80 years before anyone would think it necessary to sit down and ask who he was. George's mother, father, grandmother, they all are living in other plantations. They can't even live together. He lived at a time when anybody that owned, not their parents, not their mom, not their dad, not their grandmother, the owners of the plantation would discipline them, because Southern planters in particular believed enslaved children required early discipline. They lived in a time when fear was considered educational. They lived at a time when mercy was considered weakness. So when George pulled a cabbage instead of a weed, he was beaten. Not because the crop mattered, but because obedience always mattered more than understanding. A lot of the enslaved people later said that the beatings they remembered most weren't the hardest, but the first beating. Can you imagine just being somebody could just beat you to death if they wanted to? Because in Virginia, enslaved people couldn't even legally, they had no value beyond being a piece of property. If you were a slave in Virginia, you couldn't legally be married. Your children could be sold at any time. The law didn't even recognize Black grief. That's why they would take people, they would lock them up overnight, and then the sale of them would happen. No chance to say goodbye. When the food that they ate wasn't nourishment, the food was calculation. Cornbread provided calories. Fat pork provided salt and protein. So nothing else was necessary in the eyes of the enslavers. They had plantation handbooks that instructed owners not to overfeed enslaved people, because hunger reduced resistance. Bare feet reduced escape. Comfort was not part of the equation. So George was a kid, so he didn't understand the politics of war, but he did understand danger. He did understand the day that the ground shook. He did understand the day he heard men scream and horses fall. The Civil War was fought over the future of slavery. But enslaved people were never consulted. They learned of freedom through rumor, through movement, through chaos. When the surrender came, there was no speech, not for George. There was no flag. It was just relief. Freedom didn't arrive as a gift. It arrived as an absence. No owner, no structure, no support. You're tuned into the Jay King Show at KBLA Talk 1580. We'll be right back.
Thank you, Jay.
Huh?
All right, we're moving into segment 3.
How many minutes?
Yep, a 9-minute segment here.
9-minute segment.
Mm-hmm.
You ready?
I am.
So 26, 35. It's the Jay King Show at KBLA Talk 1580. I hope as I'm laying this out for you that you can imagine what's happening. These are people who've been enslaved for the whole of their lives, and all of a sudden, and just without warning, just one day, through rumor, through just through chaos, through how things are moving, they realize that they're free. So the United States abolished slavery without restitution. Now, former slaveholders were allowed to reclaim land. Former slaves were allowed to survive if they could. George's mother worked. She wasn't paid in money. She was paid in food and clothing. Every now and then, they would get cash. Work never stopped. So even though slavery ended, the way the formerly enslaved were treated didn't. When George got married, the act of marriage in itself was revolutionary. Because for the formerly enslaved, being able to court a woman and marry her meant dignity. It gave them recognition. And it was a human choice. Not them as chattel slavery, but as a human being. He had 14 children born into freedom. But what freedom didn't do is protect them from disease, protect them from hunger, or protect them from death. Of his 14 kids, only 6 survived. So after the emancipation, Black families faced mortality rates comparable to the war zone. Doctors were not accessible to the formerly enslaved. Hospitals were segregated or forbidden. They wouldn't take the formerly enslaved. So George was burying his children quietly and repeatedly. The reason why the church is so important, or was so important in our community, is because church became more than worship for the formerly enslaved. It became structure. Church became meaning. The church was a place where Black voices mattered. What faith didn't do is erase suffering. But what it did do was make suffering survivable. For the formerly enslaved people, the Black church replaced everything slavery destroyed. The Black church replaced family. That's why, and I don't know if we know that as a community, why we lean so heavy on the church, or why we lean so heavily on the church coming up. It's because they were still so close. Because you got to remember, George is formerly enslaved. He's born in 1858, but in 1937, he's still here. Making sure that the church was there for us, because the church became more than worship. It became a structure of meaning. It was a place where our voices could be heard, or we could exercise our power. That it was where we could build our faith, and even though it wouldn't erase our suffering, it would make our suffering survivable. So the Black church replaced everything that slavery destroyed: our family, our structure, our education, our leadership, and our memory. By the early 20th century, George Jackson was invisible, too old to matter. Nobody cares. Too poor to record, and too Black for assistant. Imagine that. Old age pensions excluded most Black workers, where white men and women got pensions for old age. Blacks didn't qualify. Jim Crow restricted mobility. Jim Crow restricted work, and Jim Crow restricted any kind of care you could possibly get. There were many former slaves that died without their names recorded. It almost happened to George. In 1937, somebody asked George, and George answered plainly, without bitterness. He spoke because silence had already taken enough. George did not change the law. He did not change history. He changed something quieter. He refused to disappear. Because of him, I remember. And now I'm telling you so you can remember. And you can tell all of us so we can remember. Slavery was not abstract. And this is important for white people to know, to hear, to listen. Because oftentimes we think that white people know these things and they don't, the same way we don't. So you don't know about George if I don't tell you. And if I don't tell you, I'm criminal. Because this is historic. This is our history. Freedom was not immediate. And survival was an achievement. George Jackson was born enslaved, but he was heard. And history is different because of it. George Jackson is more important now than he was in 1858 when he was born. George Jackson is the only voice that we know of the 16 siblings that he had. We don't know his mom and dad's voice. We don't know Betsy's voice. We don't know Henry's voice. We don't know his grandmother's voice. We know his voice. We know about his early childhood memories, including the trauma and the instability that was common among enslaved families. We know that his family didn't belong to the same owner, that his father was owned by somebody named John Butler. His grandmother was owned by a different enslaver, Thomas Humphrey. And him and his mother belonged to a third enslaver. We don't know that enslaver's name. But listen to what I'm telling you. This is the life of George Jackson, a simple man, a slave, whose voice we can hear today. You're tuned into the Jay King Show at KBLA Talk 1580. We'll be right back.
Thanks, Jay. Got it.
Okay. How many minutes here?
Yeah, went a little long. So could we go 3 and 4?
Yeah, 3 and
Or
4. Okay.
any combination of the two?
Yeah, we'll do 3 and 4. Okay. You're tuned into the Jay King Show at KBLA Talk 1580. I'm Jay King. If you like this program, you should go to iHeartRadio on your app store and download the iHeartRadio app and search for the Jay King Show, and you can hear this show and all the rest of the shows that I do. I do a lot of different types of shows on different things, some historic, some music, some financial, but I'm going to do a series of these shows on people that you should know, lives that are more valuable to us now than ever before, because we should know these stories. We should know the resilience of who we are and what we've gone through as a people. And George Jackson's life story is part of a larger phenomena. There are slave narratives that have been collected, and that were starting to be collected in the 1930s by the Federal Writers Project. And what they set out to do was record firsthand accounts of life under slavery before all the folk who lived through this horrible experience died out. So through his interview, Jackson gave historians and descendants valuable insight, not through grand political or military exploits, but through everyday life conditions enslaved people lived under, how families were split, the hardships, the minimal subsistence, the fear, the hard labor, and ultimate survival going into freedom. His narrative helps preserve the memory of ordinary enslaved people whose names otherwise would be lost to history, and whose experiences represent the majority rather than the exceptional few. So he puts a bird's eye on folk just like me and you, not the Harriet Tubmans, the Frederick Douglasses, or the Phyllis Wheatley, just a common man. So when you hear his story, multiply it by 6 million, because his story belonged to 6 million other enslaved people being treated the same harsh way. It's the Jay King Show at KBLA Talk 1580. When I come back, we'll tie this thing up. Thank you for tuning in. We'll be right back.
Great, thanks. Got it. Yep, one more. That went 3, so 4 if you'd like here.
4, ready?
Yes, sir.
It's the Jay King Show at KBLA Talk 1580. And as is common with many ex-slave narratives, George Jackson's exact birth date, his legal emancipation documents, or details about his childhood beyond memory are scarce or undocumented. And that's common for for this era. His own literacy appears limited because then, as a enslaved person, if you were taught to read or write, you could be killed, not just you, but the person who taught you. So in 1937, in the WPA interview, his reading ability was described as limited because he had only about 4 months of schooling, 4 months. There's little recorded public documentation, whether it's a newspaper, a legal record, or a memoir about his life after emancipation. The main source about George Jackson is the 1937 oral interview that makes reconstructing a full official biography, if we want, very difficult. So this narrative just reflects from his memory, which are about things that happened decades after the fact. So they can be fragmented or colored over time. And the collection that preserves Jackson's account, the slave narrative collection the Federal Writers Project did, contains over 2,300 first-person interviews with formerly enslaved 2,300. And these accounts include Jackson's are among the most important primary sources historians have for understanding the lived experiences of slavery in the United States, particularly for enslaved individuals whose lives did not intersect with public historical records, like fugitive slaves, escaped slaves, or slaves who never rose to prominence. Individuals like George Jackson demonstrate that after emancipation, a lot of the formerly enslaved people tried to rebuild their lives, often in new states, often in poverty, often with limited education, and often with little public recognition, but persisted because they were bearing witness to the brutality that they endured. If you liked this story, you can pull a full transcript of Jackson's interview from 1937 from the WPA project and learn more about George Jackson, but more importantly, not just him, but those who endured the same life he did. My name is Jay King, and you've been tuned into the Jay King Show at KBLA Talk 1580. I hope to see you next time. That might.
Yeah, got that. Thank you so much. Good story.
I think I'm going to do a series of these. I got to do some more research, but I'll do a series of them.
I think that's a great idea. I think getting the word out and a little history, the history nobody knows or hears.
Yeah. The Casual Killing Act of 1669.
Yeah.
But casual.
And Janet Marie was right here. George Jackson was the founder of the Black Panther Party, right? He was imprisoned and
Oh yeah, that's another that's not this George Jackson.
Yeah, it was a different one.
But yeah, there are a lot of them. And I thought this George Jackson you were talking about, I looked it up real quick. There was George Jackson who
No, this was George Jackson, who was an enslaved person that you never knew, that you wouldn't be able to find out anything on because he don't matter.
Yeah, there was one on the Andrew Jackson plantation also, but that's in Tennessee, I believe. So, yeah, these are very interesting stories that I think we all need to hear.
I agree.
All right,
All
Jay.
right.
Anything else?
That's it. Thank you guys for tuning in. Download the iHeartRadio app, you guys. Go to your app store, download the iHeartRadio app, and then search for the Jay King Show. Follow me there.
Thanks, Jay.
Hmm?
Thanks all.
You're welcome. Okay, ending it now.
Thank you. Thank you, Mitch.
You're welcome.